All right, now, normally I feel like I put a little more effort into these types of things. However, I'm not going to buy this product, but given the amount of attention it's gotten in the past couple of, well, I guess a week now. Yeah, last Tuesday, Apple had their event. I was going to wait and record this video later, but I'm in the process of watching Google I/O, and every year I watch it, I fall asleep. I mean, it's not for me. So yeah, I enjoy coding sometimes. I mean, just for fun. I took some classes, but I don't like sitting down all day staring at a computer screen and all the other stuff that comes along with it. So it's not for me. So instead of me just sitting there and falling asleep, I figured that I'd go ahead and knock this out. Now, by all means, this is Dave 2D's video. That's why I have it right now on the screen. And I feel like he brought up a lot of good points. And because I know I'm not going to buy the product, I'm probably not going to watch anybody else's review of it. But there are some things that he said that I feel like need to be expanded or expounded upon. And I like his videos because usually they're pretty succinct. And his video is actually 14 minutes long, close to 15, which is actually, I feel, long for him. So me talking over it is going to make this video even longer, which is actually on par for me. So let's get to it and we'll see what he has to say. And like I said before, there are a few things where I feel like he should have expanded upon it. And I guess in summary, before we even begin, I'd say, yeah, the iPad is a okay device. Could it be better? Absolutely. Am I anti-Apple? No. But there are a lot of instances where it is clear that they could have made better decisions, and those better decisions would have led to a better product. So let's start.
This is the new 13-inch iPad Pro, and this is the new 11-inch iPad Pro, both of them new for 2024, and they're both running Apple's new M4 chip. But this product here is my trusty 2018 iPad Pro. This thing is almost 6 years old at this point, but I've never really been tempted to upgrade this product. I feel like this has been all the iPad that I could possibly want. But when I went to New York and checked out these devices, I was like, they were so tempting. And then after this review period, I absolutely will be finally upgrading this 2018 device. It's going to be to this 13-inch device, but it's not for the reason that it originally thought. So first thing, a quick note on the unboxing. So typically when it comes to Apple products, there's usually some kind of sticker inside the package. It could be like a white sticker or a colored sticker depending on the product, but usually there's some kind of plastic sticker in there. But seemingly in an effort to reduce their plastic consumption, the stickers in Apple products are gone. But the second thing that was interesting is that on the 13-inch iPad Pro, and only the 13-inch, not the 11-inch iPad Pro, you get a black charging cable. The brick is still white, but black charging cable. And the thought that I had was like, why are they separating the 13 and 11-inch? And typically when Apple includes like a black accessory, it's like the Pro product. It's the thing that makes it like the most Pro. And you'll see, in terms of the performance, the 13-inch is actually a more Pro device than the 11. So I just found it strange that they included a black charging cable only on the 13. This is crazy. I'm talking about colors of charging cables, but that's just how Apple does things. All right, let's talk about these displays because these new OLED panels are arguably the most interesting things about.
Now, again, I honestly don't care. And in fact, I didn't even plan on stopping it. And I know what he just said. And I assume that he's done a little more research. But I mean, just looking at the colors of the two iPads that he has in front of him. I mean, one is, I don't know if that's the space gray or the space black. And then the smaller one is silver or whatever colors they use. I mean, is that the reason they are different? Does he know for sure that the colors are different for the 13-inch one compared to the 11-inch, the 11-inch one, or is that based off of the color of the iPad itself? Honestly, I don't care. And in fact, I didn't plan on stopping it right there, but I figured I'd just throw that in there to see if that's the actual reason, not just the size of the iPad.
These new iPads. They both have these new super bright OLED panels, and the tech required to get on this bright is incredible. So it's a pair of OLED panels run in tandem, and they have these incredibly energy efficient display engines to be able to pull it off. But despite these very bright screens, they still have very good battery life. And even when I crank the OLED panels to full brightness, it still has excellent run times.
Now, a few things right there. So the overall brightness, I know on the website, I believe it says 1600 nits, 1600 nits max brightness with HDR content. And I took a screenshot, and if I, edited into this video for the M2 iPad Pro that also said 1600 nits of max screen brightness. So when he's doing his comparisons, and he'll do them later on in the video, I assume that he's doing those comparisons between the M4 and his 2018 iPad Pro, not the mini LED one that came out in between. So I don't really think that it's that much of an improvement over the previous version. Maybe, yeah, an iPad Pro that came out 6 years ago, yeah, you're going to see some improvements in screen technologies, and brightness being one of those benefits. The other thing I wanted to mention on this particular screen is he's talking about battery life. Now, I could be wrong, and I'll preface that because I honestly don't know. But he's showing us a graph, and it does appear that his 2018 iPad Pro just has worse battery life overall, and not by much. I mean, yeah, not by much at all. But my question at this point is the information he's using from his 2018 iPad Pro information that he pulled back in 2018, or is this information that he's pulling from his iPad Pro today? Because if he is pulling it from today's iPad, or today's 2018 iPad, that means that there's a possibility, and again, more information we don't know, that battery is 6 years old. And if that battery is 6 years old and these numbers are what they are, then I'd have to say that 6 years ago, he got better battery life than what's being displayed on this screen. And then that would also most likely be better and then that would also mean either the same or better battery life than what Apple is putting in these newer iPads. So I don't know. But that I feel like is something else to consider. So, I think like a nice little something would have been nice because, yeah, I'm just under the assumption that in order to make this video, he set up all of the iPads next to each other and did what he needed to do. But I do know some people have historical information, and then, yeah, he might be pulling from that. But either way, yeah, an 8-year-old iPad is pretty good. And if we're talking about these marginal improvements in terms of battery life, that's not great. The other thing to be mentioned, which I don't think he covers it, is the fact that at least going from the M1 iPad Pro to the M4 iPad Pro, in order to achieve that thinness of the newer iPads, they had to reduce the battery capacity. So the chip inside is more efficient, but the battery is smaller, and that's how we end up with a similar battery life expectancy. Now, as a person who's not going to buy it, but as a person who does use portable technology, one, nobody was complaining about the thickness of the previous version of the iPad Pro. Two, I feel like it would have been in the customer's best interest to leave the iPad the same thickness and then just either put the same battery capacity in there, or a battery with the same battery capacity, or one that's larger. And at that point, with the new iPad, with this more efficient chip, you would now get better battery life, not better life with that is on par with iPads of previous generations. So just my thoughts. And then, of course, the last thing is the fact now that because the iPad Pro is so thin, it's actually thinner, and I believe even lighter than the iPad Air, questioning the point of the iPad Air in general, or at least adding on the word Air to iPad if it's no longer the actual Air device, because another one is thinner, lighter, and more powerful than it.
These are amazing displays, and I actually think these are the first devices out there of like consumer tech that uses this type of screen tech. It's really visible in bright environments. Like if you're using it right beside a super bright window or outdoors on a sunny day, these new OLED screens are way better than the stuff we've seen before.
And yeah, and again, just like I'm saying before, I feel like the M1 iPad Pro probably would have been similar in performance right here. I don't know if he has one on tap or what, but yeah, a 6-year gap. I'm happy to see that there's some difference, but I think if we just went back to the M1 one, which was what, maybe 3 years ago, I want to say we probably wouldn't really be able to tell much of a difference at all.
But if I'm being honest with myself, aside from the brightness of these screens outdoors, I don't actually think that these new panels are that much better than even my 2018 iPad Pro. Like, if you compare these products in terms of their generations side by side, yes, it is noticeable, but you gotta have them side by side. If I'm looking at them individually, I feel like they've been amazing displays since 2018.
And that's something that I've been giving Apple credit for a while as well. Like, not just the iPad, but the Mac as well, that the screens are great. So every year they might say something is improved with the screen of that new one. And it's not every year, but just know that, yeah, even when you have older Macs, the screen and older iPads, the screens are usually pretty good.
The 2018 or newer 11-inch iPad Pros, they're just regular IPS panels, but they're so high quality that even 6 years later, they still look good. And then the 12.9-inch iPad Pros with the mini LED panels, those have a little bloom sometimes, but they look awesome. And when I'm indoors, yes, these new OLED panels look amazing, but so does basically any iPad Pro since 2018. That's just the conclusion I think many people would draw. There is one exception. It's that if you really need color accurate screens, like the best color accuracy is going to come from the newest tech. So if you work with photo and video and you really need that perfect color accuracy, these are going to do a better job. Also, there's another thing. It's the ghosting that has appeared in the previous generations of, iPad Pros. So yes, 2018 and onwards, they've all had 120 hertz ProMotion, but the response time on these older panels have been a little on the slow side. So if you played like fast-paced games at high refresh, the response time was slow enough that you see some ghosting. It doesn't have that issue on these new screens because OLED tech has very fast response time. Okay, the other thing that's changed, the other major change, is the dimensions and weight. So both the 13-inch and the 11-inch are thinner and lighter than the previous generation of these products. And it's pretty significant on the 13-inch device. This is 5.1 millimeters thin. It's really thin and quite a bit lighter than the previous generation. I'm someone who's always appreciated the pursuit of thinness and the reduction of weight. And the way that Apple did it here, it's like even more commendable because they did not reduce the performance and they did not reduce the battery life on these products, even when they shrank them down like this. So that's really cool.
And yeah, as I was saying before, it's cool that they made it thin, but comparatively speaking, battery life is worse because they reduced the battery capacity. So yeah, is that a good trade-off? In my opinion, no. Because if people aren't complaining about how thick the previous generation of the iPad is, just keep it the same. And then just keep the battery the same. And then now put a more efficient chip in the iPad, and now you got to win. But yeah, kudos to them. I mean, I think they've said that this new iPad is thinner than one of the iPod Nanos. Like, great, on them. That's amazing, I guess. But it giving us the same the same user experience, I feel like it's still technically compromising the experience because it could have been better. It could have been better if they did nothing to the chassis and they only just changed the screen and then put that more efficient chip in there. But they had to, but when they made it thinner, they changed some of the way that the heat was distributed. I want to say that the Apple in the back of the iPad is now a heat sink, essentially, like helping dissipate some of the heat. So yeah, kudos to them. And at the end of the day, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's if you had done nothing and just swapped the M1 for the M4 and then swapped the mini LED display for an OLED display, I feel like that would be a better iPad. But, the pursuit of thinness, cool. We've seen that the pursuit of thinness for the iPhone and for the Mac was a bad idea. Today's iPhone is thicker than some iPhones of the past, and today's MacBook Pros are definitely thicker than MacBook Pros of the past, and you end up with a better user experience because you need to be able to dissipate the heat. Things aren't bending, and you get ports. So definitely thinness can be cool. But as I look at my bag over there that has that iPhone 7 in it, yeah, that was a very thin iPhone. But what happened when we went from the iPhone 6S to the iPhone 7? We lost the headphone jack. Could they have fit one on it? Probably. But I definitely know, in addition to courage, the fact that it was so thin was a easy justification for them removing such a coveted jack.
I will say that there's something about me that just doesn't trust a 5.1 thick, 5.1 millimeter thick device. Like, these are review units, they're loaners, so I'm not going to bend them. There's no way I would do that. But I'm sure someone out.
You know what? I'm going to stop right now, and it's completely off topic, and I'm sure most people aren't going to watch this video anyway. But I am currently watching Google I/O, and I forget the gentleman's name, but he always does his thing, and I find it interesting that he is, he's doing the demo on the Pixel watch. Sorry, on the Pixel phone. I don't know if that's an 8, probably an 8 or something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But he's actually wearing a Galaxy watch. So I wonder if the phone he carries is also a Galaxy. So I wonder if that's also maybe like a collaborative thing of, hey, we're working with Samsung to do some things. But yeah, normally, especially with Apple events, it's Apple everything. And I haven't really been paying attention to the other presenters, so I don't know if they had on any smartwatches. But yeah, that's a Galaxy watch, if not a Garmin, but I'm pretty sure it's a Galaxy watch with a bright orange wristband. So that's really what got my attention. But I can definitively tell you it's not a Pixel watch. Anyway, back to this video.
There's going to do some testing where you just crank it. 5.1 millimeters is so thin, so we'll see how it holds up over time. They're also both lighter, and the 13-inch one, again, is particularly impressive. But for me, I typically have my iPads like mounted on a stand or something, or just sitting on a table, so the weight reduction isn't that critical to me.
And he's going to say a few more things, so I probably should have paused it after the fact. But yeah, there are some people where they are carrying them around all the time, but I feel like for most people, they might be holding it like in their hand, but sitting. Or they might use the Magic Keyboard and mount it, in the little Magic Keyboard case and then be sitting typing or whatever. So I feel like spending $1,000 on an iPad is a bad idea. Because even for the examples he gives, minus like the actual creative people that need the color accuracy and low latency and even a bigger canvas, everybody else would probably be just fine with either the iPad Air or just a regular base iPad in terms of being able to have a portable computer that allows you to touch the screen and do whatever that you need to do. So in my opinion, these things are definitely good devices, but overkill to most people. And even for those people who it might not be overkill for, I would then also ask them, why buy this instead of buying a MacBook? And I think he mentions it, or it might have been a podcast I was listening to where they're trying to draw comparisons between the iPad Pro and the MacBook Pro. For me, it's, well, you have to look at more overlapping things than just the word Pro, because I think a more accurate comparison is comparing the iPad Pro to the MacBook Air. And that's mainly because neither one of them have fans. Now, while the MacBook is stuck with or currently has the M3 chip instead of the M4 chip, which they'll get the M4 chip later on, that definitely I still feel like it's a relatively fair comparison. And then if you were to then start looking at the MacBook Pros compared to the iPad Pro, at that point I don't think it's a fair competition. Mainly because you can get the M3 Pro, the M3 Max. You can get options with more RAM, and then of course more storage options. I don't know all the storage options for the iPad, but I don't think you can get as many terabytes in the iPad as you can the Mac. So let's continue.
For people that carry these things around all the time, they're on a job site, they're just walking around with these things, or in a hospital, that weight reduction is a nice bonus.
And again, as I was saying, that for those people, notice he didn't mention any creators. For those people, you probably don't need an iPad Pro. A regular iPad most likely will be just fine. Again, don't know what all their work scenarios are, but yeah.
Okay, The M4 chip. This is the first device, or these two devices are the first devices that have the new Apple M4 chip. Incredibly fast, but still very energy efficient. Now, both of these are able to handle their heat output well, but the 13-inch one is fractionally better. That's why it has the black cable, all right? The thing is, though, aside from these synthetic benchmarks, it's actually really hard for me to tell the M1 chip devices from these new M4 chips.
And that's been my statement. I don't want to say argument, but my statement for a while, that if you feel like, oh, I need an iPad Pro, first I'm like, well, what are you doing on your iPad? And, MacBooks aside, which that's how I feel, that if you need something that allows you to do a lot of work, you should probably consider getting a MacBook. But, MacBooks aside, I know that, when the previous iPad came out, it was, iPad Pro this, iPad Pro that, it has an M1 chip in it, blah, 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 blah. And then they put the chip in the iPad Air. So then I'm just like, well, what exactly are you doing on this Pro that you couldn't do on the Air then? And then now that the M2 chip is in the iPad Air, because they refreshed it this year, then I'm definitely like, okay, so what are you doing that you need this M4 chip that you couldn't do on yesteryear's iPad? So yeah, I'm happy he's mentioning it, that yeah, when you run the benchmarks, you can see that there are some differences, but in everyday use cases, for the most part, for most people, you're not going to see much difference. And there's no reason to spend the extra money on these more expensive devices.
Like, they're so similar. And from the perspective of me, who's trying to replace a 2018 device, even then, the 2018 model I have benchmarks way worse than these M4 devices.
And that's just, synthetic benchmarks. And it would be the same thing with a MacBook, that if I had my M1 MacBook Air still, and I compared it even to this is, an M1 Pro MacBook Pro. So similar architectures and things, similar release years, but I have an M2 MacBook Air. Yeah, I'm sure between the three devices, you'd see differences with these synthetic benchmarks. However, the only time I would actually see a real world difference is when doing video editing. And I specifically bought this Pro device for video editing. But for the web browsing that I normally do, for some Facebook, for some YouTube, for some FaceTiming, any of the three devices, I wouldn't see really any noticeable difference. So if I weren't video editing, I probably never would have bought this particular device. So as he's showing these benchmark scores, if he's, just doing the regular stuff, then the benchmark scores really don't matter. And that's really where Apple shines, in convincing you that you need the latest and greatest, even though what you are actually doing on today's product, you probably won't see much difference on tomorrow's product. Again, for most people, there are the outliers. And when I say outliers, even video editing, I think would count as an outlier, because a lot of people aren't doing that. But the devices, like the Pro devices, are made for that.
But in terms of the stuff that I do, like streaming shows or taking notes and the occasional drawing app, it still feels really snappy, even compared to the new M4. Okay, I want to move on to the conversation of the new Apple Pencil Pro. So this is the new Apple Pencil Pro that I cannot really use properly because I'm not an artist, but my niece is, so I let her draw on it for a couple hours, and these are some thoughts she had. The barrel roll feature, where the gyroscope inside the Apple Pencil Pro can sense the rotation degree of the barrel, it's neat, but it's seemingly very situational, like very few brushes and or markers can actually take advantage of it, so it's not necessary for most digital illustration. But the squeeze gesture, she really liked that. So in the beginning, she found it a little bit cumbersome because it would trigger a few times by accident, but once she got used to it, you could tell that she was able to switch colors and access different tools a lot quicker than using the traditional UI, and she liked that. And then the last thing is the haptic motor that's inside the Apple Pencil Pro. So when you squeeze the barrel and you do that squeeze gesture, you get this little haptic bump that just tells you that you squeeze it. It's just to make the whole process of squeezing the barrel and then like selecting things feel a little bit more deliberate. It's like a very subtle thing. It's nothing crazy, but again, it's just a nice little feature add on this device. Now, the issue that I have with this whole product, the whole Apple Pencil Pro, is that this is only available on the new iPad Pros. You cannot use this new Apple Pencil Pro with the old generations of iPad Pros, even the one that came out 2 years ago. And to me, like, okay, the reasoning behind it is that because the front-facing camera is now mounted on the landscape edges, right on the sides of these iPads, and it's a great position, right? You just get better FaceTime angles on the side there, and Face Unlock is a little bit better on that side, but it just kills me. They're claiming that because the camera's positioned there, the magnetic and charging system had to be tweaked, and therefore these new ones can't work. Like, it just feels a little too convenient that now, if you want this new Apple Pencil Pro with all its new features, you have to buy a whole new iPad to be able to get it. And I mean, it might be true, it's probably true, but it just still kills me.
And obviously these are his opinions as I'm giving my opinions, and he, says that it's probably true. I'd say, and I would say that yes, how it is designed, it is probably true, but at the same time, there are brilliant people that work at Apple. They could have figured out something else so that you didn't have to get a new iPad if you just wanted to get this new Apple Pencil. They could have figured something out. Whatever it is, they definitely could have figured it out. And I think it goes both ways that, okay, on these iPads, yes, the Apple Pencil Pro will work, but the second generation Apple Pencil will not. But the USB-C Apple Pencil will. So it's just making things more confusing than they need to be. And for a $3 trillion company to tell you, oh, we couldn't figure out how to get this new Apple Pencil to work with the old iPad, or we couldn't figure out how to get your current Apple Pencil to work with this new iPad, the second generation Apple Pencil, it's a bunch of BS. I mean, yeah, that's what they are really good at, clearly, of putting us in these situations to feel like we should trust them, which, I mean, I've gotten to the point where I just don't. And then with that trust comes giving them more money. So as you put it, before he said he kind of believes them, is it's too convenient. Oh, yeah, it's too convenient that they did this. Now, as they plan for things in the future, I feel like, yeah, that USB-C Apple Pencil that came almost seamlessly out of nowhere was probably like, okay, we know we have this Apple Pencil Pro coming. We know that's only going to work with these new iPads. Let's give them a second pencil to use. So we'll create that. And I think there's some differences. There's a whole chart on Apple's website if you want to go see the differences between the four Apple Pencils. But yeah, they knew what they were doing. They could have figured this out. In fact, I mean, one would go back to say, well, the camera should have never been where it was on the iPads to begin with. And by putting it there, they were thinking way into the future of how are we going to then screw customers over later by just moving the camera to where it should be to begin with. And that could potentially push or drive additional iPad sales and Apple Pencil sales. So don't know, but Apple knew what they were doing.
That's the state of how you get the new Apple Pencil Pro to work. I also want to talk about these new keyboards. So this here is the new Magic Keyboard for the new iPad Pros. And again, you can only get this new keyboard with the new iPad Pros. And the whole keyboard feels very good. Like, this is a very similar keyboard to, in terms of like the feel and even the aesthetics, to the keyboards that are on the existing MacBook lineup.
Now, two things. So I've mentioned it before, and I will continue saying it, that if you are in the process of buying an iPad and then buying an accessory that then makes it feel like a MacBook, just buy the MacBook. I mean, if there were a big price delta between the two products, then I'd say, okay, I could kind of see why you want that experience, but then you don't want to spend MacBook money. But the iPad Pro 13-inch, I believe, starts at $1,300, which is more than the MacBook Air, which I feel is the better thing to compare it to. But if you then get this keyboard case, that's another $350. So now we're over the price of the cheapest MacBook Pro that has a 14-inch screen. So I really don't understand the logic of a person. I mean, some people want to take it off and walk around with it. Believe me, as a person who is, sitting here holding a MacBook Air, this is not a hard thing to carry. Plus, it's balanced. I'm not worried that something's going to fall off. I close it when I'm not using it. And even if I did need to walk around with it, it's not a hassle to do. I mean, this thing it's sturdy, so I'm not worried about it. Whereas with an iPad with a keyboard case, I'd be worried about it. Then if I take the iPad off and then put the keyboard case somewhere else, now I got to store that. It seems like a bad idea, but hey, I could be wrong. Now, the other thing I'll mention, and he's not even going to talk about it because most people don't, even though Apple made the change and they knowingly made a change for a particular reason, that right there on the back of it, they reduced the number of cameras that were on the backside of the iPad from 2 down to 1, I believe. And I have long since complained about the fact that USB-C and USB 3 came to iPads before iPhones. And I know, if I were to go back and try to, look at some of the old Apple events, in those events, they had people using the iPad's camera to record movies, which, of course, if you did do that, okay, but then getting that information off the iPad, if you don't want to edit it on the iPad, cool. You have a Thunderbolt port on the bottom of this Pro device. Meanwhile, while that was happening, so not including the iPhone 15, you're stuck with Lightning on the iPhone Pro, whatever number. And then that Lightning connector only supported USB 2. And then the big highlight of the iPhone every year is how good the cameras are. And I know there are a lot of people who don't take the information off of the phone after they record videos or take pictures, but there are people who do. And crippling that port to USB 2, even after you've touted how good the cameras are, to me is just mind-boggling. And yet another reason why I don't believe anything they say in terms of, oh, well, this leads to a better experience or whatever. Like, they purposely crippled devices, the iPhones, and then now it looks like they finally acknowledged that nobody's using this camera really to do much. So let's get rid of one of these lenses. I think we got a better flash, like a more adaptive flash and some type of sensor there instead. And yeah, I feel like that might be a good use for that. But the camera on the iPad is not better than that on the phone. So the fact that they finally got rid of that second lens, cool, whatever. But yeah, I'm completely salty, I guess would be the appropriate term, that my iPhone 15, yeah, I don't have a Pro, but my iPhone 15, yes, does have USB-C, but that USB-C port still operates at USB 2 speeds. So it sucks. It really, really sucks.
It's got this metal keyboard deck and a trackpad that is also like a haptic trackpad. This is not a trackpad that you depress and like it physically moves up and down. There's a bit of movement, but the tap that you feel, the kind of click that you feel, is from a motor on the inside that generates that kind of tactile feedback, just like their MacBooks. But typing on this keyboard is awesome. I type as fast on this thing as I would on basically any laptop keyboard. It just feels like a better typing experience than the one you got from the previous generation of Magic Keyboard. Like, the keys on this just feel a little bit more responsive. And also, it's a aluminum surface, which some people might like. The older one had that like soft touch rubber, which I didn't mind, but...
And I wonder, I mean, obviously I'm not in the boardrooms with them, but if this is where we're going to end up anyway, in terms of the look, feel, design of this Magic Trackpad, it's the same price. I believe they have the starting same price, like $350 for the bigger one, $300 for the little one. Was this a suggested item however many years ago when this other Magic Trackpad or Magic, whatever you want to call it, keyboard was first created, designed? Like, could somebody say, hey, let's just use metal and have it feel like a MacBook instead? And then somebody else said, no, let's do it this way. And that way we'll create it, we'll release it, some people will buy it. And then when we come out with this one, people will buy this one. And I believe this new Magic Trackpad, whatever, get up, isn't compatible with older iPads. He might say it. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But I feel like there are some other differences that Apple has created so that this particular thing only works with a few devices.
It does feel more premium on this new product, but the pricing between the two Magic Keyboards is still the same. So this year, with the new iPad Pros, you just get a way better product all around, right? You get a better screen, better chip, better pencil, better keyboard, better front-facing camera position, and all while the device is being thinner and lighter. The price has gone up by about $100, depending on the configuration, but it does have a higher base configuration than before, so it is more expensive to get into this whole product line.
And like that's what they did with the iPhone Pro Max. That base storage started at 128, and then now base storage starts at 256. So if you want the phone, it just costs $100 more because there is no option for that base storage of 128. Now, I will say when it comes to the phone, again, not giving Apple any credit, but just saying, okay, there is one instance where I'd say that might make sense. After I went on my little rant about how Apple rants about how good their cameras are, I do know, and it might have been either starting with the 14 or the 13, I don't remember, but there was a recording mode when shooting video. I'll just call it ProRes. I could be wrong, it might be a different name, but I'll call it ProRes. That the file sizes were so big that Apple knew that if you had the 128 gigabyte storage option, if you recorded video in that format, you would run out of storage super quick. So Apple just said, if you have this storage configuration on your phone, you cannot shoot video in this way. Now, however Apple feels about that or how consumer feels about that, it is what it is. And I feel like that kind of sucks that if you bought the phone and it had the hardware, Apple disabled a feature because you chose to just get the 128 as opposed to the 256. Now, to kind of go off topic real quick, but then to continue on this topic, I remember I was talking about the fact that Apple and other people are touting the fact that now with the iPhone 15 Pro Max and Pro, you can plug in an external hard drive, or external SSD, and you can record video directly to that external device. And I pointed out the fact that, well, you can do this already on Android devices. It's not an Android versus iOS thing, but it kind of is that this capability has been around for a long time. And I remember somebody in one of my comments was saying that, oh, well, now you can record video externally, blah, blah. Just saying that, hey, this is why they're doing it now and it's a good thing or whatever. And it now allows this particular feature. And I'm like, well, no, you could have done it with the old phones. Apple just turned it off. So don't give them credit now for now saying you can do something because you can record externally. So what am I getting at in this little particular section? How did I even start this? I was talking about external stuff. I don't remember. But anyway, what was he about to say?
But the fact remains, this is a just infinitely, it's a better product.
Yeah, somewhere along the lines about cameras, better product. I forget kind of where I just went on a little tangent right there. So, yeah.
Compared to anything I've had before. Now, when I went to New York and I got to see these things, I was like, okay, for sure, I'm gonna be upgrading. But then, having gotten the review units in, I'm starting to get some cold feet because everything I'm comparing it to my 2018, I'm like, it's better, but the overall experience didn't really change for me.
Yes, it's an iPad. I would almost bet money because he said it. He's not really an artist, and that's why he gave the iPad to his niece to kind of test out the little Apple Pencil. That if you switched his iPad with an iPad Air, I'm not going to say like the base iPad, but even with an iPad Air, I doubt he would even see much of a difference because it's just simple stuff that it sounds like he does. Why did he get a Pro instead of one of the less expensive ones? I don't know. Probably because he has millions of YouTube subscribers and he can just afford it. That'll be my guess. But yeah, it's an iPad, and iPad OS is kind of the same across iPads. You will have some little differences here and there, but for the most part, iPad OS is iPad OS. The same way iOS is iOS. The same way Mac OS is Mac OS. And you can almost say the same thing about Windows and the different device manufacturers, but you will get some different stuff there. But yeah, it's a very similar experience across the board, and it sounds like he's very, very hesitant. But he says something else in a couple minutes, and I really want to get into that.
Especially for the stuff that I do. But then, yesterday, just as I was like gathering my thoughts around this stuff, I had this crazy epiphany. So, the way that I shoot my videos right now, if you guys have noticed, I have multiple cameras all running at the same time, usually 2, sometimes 3 or 4, and they're all being fed to one computer that's running OBS. And I try to edit my videos in real time. Like I'll switch camera angles and try different transitions while I shoot my videos. And I do all of this through a Stream Deck. I press buttons, I can control the cameras as I shoot. But in Apple's keynote video, they showed this multicam setup thing that was running on Final Cut for iPads. And I thought it was kind of neat, but then they showed me a demonstration of it in front of my face of like how it's all done. And I was blown away. I saw this thing being done. I was like, this is crazy. Like they were running 4 cameras, kind of similar to what I'm trying to pull off, but it was all done without any wires. It was just done with a single iPad, and it was controlling all the things like the zoom, the focus. Like it was just crazy. And this setup that I have here, this took me like, I don't know, a week and a half to really kind of configure it. And even now I'm still like fiddling with it. But this has 50 wires, and there's so much stuff that I have to tweak and fix all the time. Not so much fix, but there's so much stuff that I need to fiddle with. And all of this thing hinges on that computer right there, a very decked out Mac Studio. Now, before I had that Mac, I used to run it on a regular Windows PC. I had an RTX 4090 in a 13th gen Intel system. I also tried an AMD system. Those PCs were way too loud for what I'm doing because we have 4K cameras that are being fed into a thing that's encoded live, and sometimes I would stream this stuff out. So all of that processing, it can handle it on a regular Windows system, but the fan noise was really annoying to work around it. So I tried running the system in a separate room, but it's just like I wanted access to the computer. Like,
so yeah, and that's why I like his videos, because sometimes they seem unscripted. He probably has some notes, and he's just like, all right, let me make sure I cover everything. But I understand exactly what he's saying. That I had a Dell Precision 5470, I think is what it was. Had an i9 in it, 32 gigs of RAM. And then I open OBS and the fans just start kicking up. And it's like, I can't use this. Like, I can't use it right, wherever my microphone was, whether I was using the internal one or one next to it, that the fans were so loud that it just wasn't feasible to actually do it. So I came over to the MacBook Pro, and so far it's cool. Like I'm using your OBS to make this video. Yeah, the bottom's getting a little warm. It's also sitting on a blanket, so I can't say that there's really anything. But the important thing is the fan noise. If the fan is on, I can't even hear it. So I know they're spinning, but I can't hear them. And that's exactly where Apple Silicon really shines. It's powerful enough to do what you need to do. And for those devices that have fans, unless you are really pushing it, you're not going to hear it. Like, in fact, I heard the fans in this 16-inch MacBook Pro a couple days ago. I was out sitting in a car. It was probably, 70-something degrees in the car. I was recording a video using OBS. I was also using continuity camera with an iPhone sitting right next to it. And the fan started kicking up because the thing was on my waist, was sitting on my lap. So it kicked up a little bit, but it was I had to stop talking and kind of put my ear close to the machine, kind of quiet, in order to hear the fans. But what he's talking about is, essentially having, or I'll say changing his current setup from having everything feed into that Mac Studio, the 4 cameras. It looks like he had a monitor. I don't know what type of microphone setup he's using, but a lot of stuff is getting fed back into that very powerful computer. I've had a Mac Studio, and they are good. And like that, if I were stationary, like living someplace and I knew I was going to be there for a while, I'd probably try to do something similar. Right now, it's not about me, but I just don't have that. So I'm doing what I would do here. And I'm kind of halfway on board with what he's saying, that, like as I just mentioned earlier, sitting in the car, I wanted a second camera angle, open my iPhone, and boom, I have a second camera there with 0 wires. And that's a really good thing. So I have 500 something subscribers and make videos, kind of passively like this, Whereas he has his millions of subscribers, and then he, wants to make sure that the experience is great. So feeding 4 iPhones into a single iPad, it looks like it works, and it looks like he's been there to see it actually work. How will that affect the quality of his overall output? Or I guess I should say, how should that affect the quality, the overall quality of the output? I'm not sure. So it sounds like he's convinced that he might actually want to buy it, and if he does, he'll probably run a few tests and see what happens. And if he likes it, then great. If he doesn't, whatever. But even though he has all the wires, and it would be nice to have the camera here, camera there, camera there, camera there, whatever. At some point, I feel like he is going to reach like some type of limitation to the point where it's okay. This iPad, yeah, it has a great chip on it, but it only has 16 gigs of RAM. Is that enough? I guess. I don't know. And I guess I should check to see if 16 is the max that you can get. I honestly don't know, because it's been a while since I've looked at the iPad site, and I don't think you can actually configure the amount of RAM the way that you do in a MacBook. I think if you choose certain features, it just bumps you up to 16 gigs of RAM. Same thing with storage. He said that the Mac Studio was maxed out, so it probably has 4 or 8 terabytes worth of storage. And if he's recording this many streams simultaneously, he needs that much space. When it comes to an iPad, at that point, yeah, it's shooting video from an iPhone, but he probably used that ProRes or whatever video setting, and then file sizes get pretty large. Is the internal storage on that iPad going to be enough? Is he going to have to connect that iPad to some type of external drive, like I was saying, that you can record things externally because you have that faster throughput? And actually, I know that's a feature on the iPhone. Is that something that you could then pass through on the iPad? I don't know. Yeah, so a lot of questions. I mean, personally, I feel like, yeah, at some point he's going to reach some type of limitation. Be like, you know what, my setup is a little more convoluted, but it works. With the iPhone, everything's wireless. Apple hopes that their things always work, but we'll see. So I think, yeah, his setup is a lot, but a lot of people do it, and I think that's probably the better thing. And I know when it comes to camera quality, yeah, they're good on the iPhone, and in fact, the iPad event at the end says was shot on iPhone. I think edited on iPhone, or sorry, iPad and Mac. Like how they distributed that work, I don't know all the details. So yeah, the cameras are good, but they're not as good as what he's currently using, even if it does require him to have a bunch of wires. Now, again, I'll shut up after this. When it comes to being mobile, like even the people in Apple's keynote, yes, that's a cool thing. That if you're going to be moving around, for me, even sitting out in the car, yes, that's a cool thing that I can take my laptop, take a phone, and now immediately have not only the camera that's here on the MacBook, but have a good camera with the iPhone and have no wires. That's absolutely great. So we'll see. And not that it matters, but obviously he and I are both touting the fact that you can do it wirelessly. I do remember when I was using continuity camera, it told me to either lock or unlock the phone, and then it should connect. And I think it also said if I connect a wire to the Mac, it'll connect as well. So I don't know if you can use it wired. Are there any benefits? I don't know, but we'll see.
It was a pain. So I got this M2 Mac Studio in, but it's a borrowed unit. This is not mine. It has to go back. And I was like, okay, if I have to do this whole setup using a stupidly expensive Mac computer, or I could use this iPad and do the same kind of thing with no wires. I'm like, I want to try that. I need to try that thing. Now, unfortunately, that app is not available for testing right now. So I'm like, I couldn't even, the idea was that I would be able to play with it and talk to you guys about it, but I'm pretty sure that that's the setup I want to switch to.
Now, the other thing, and I'm happy he said that, and then I came back, is there's no way that app, Final Cut camera, and then whatever, I'll just call it Final Cut. It might have been Final Cut 2 or whatever it's called on iPad. Yeah, I don't remember. And I don't think there's any way that feature or that setup doesn't become also possible using an iPhone and a Mac. I don't know, obviously, but having to have an iPad just seems like a big miss. Where, okay, you have these iPhones, which I guess people are buying iPhones just for cameras. I mean, I honestly don't know. But if they are, then okay. And, it sounds like that's what he would be doing. But in my mind, there's no way that you don't get that same option with Mac OS and an iPhone. And in fact, I should probably figure it out because, well, I don't know. I don't have to figure it out. But if continuity camera already works, then there's no way that I can't just now use two iPhones. I know OBS will detect them, but should detect them both. And then he has his little switch thing to move stuff all about. I don't have one of those, so I'm not exactly sure how they work. But it sounds like it's kind of like a pre-configured shortcut to, okay, when I press this button, use these two cameras, turn these cameras off, slide stuff to the left or right, whatever. So I can imagine, big speculation, that either that ability already works with iPhone and Mac through continuity camera, or that feature will come to iPhone and Mac through whatever app, Final Cut and the other stuff as well. I just don't see it not being equally capable on a Mac.
It just seems so fluid and effortless and just easy to use. And because I try to do my stuff live and interact with it live, I mean, that's the dream of how I want to make content. So I'm totally picking up one of these 13-inch devices. Again, these are loaners; they have to go back, but I'm going to buy one, and hopefully, I can do what they showed in the marketing material. Now, you might be looking at this and being like, "Dude, that's marketing material. That's not going to work." Maybe it won't, but I think when I see that, I see what that thing could do, and the same thing goes with like the Logic Pro and the whole ecosystem that is available on the high-level iPads right now is incredible. Like, it's actually kind of strange. I mean, it's changed the perspective of how I view these products. Like, the very first time I reviewed one of the kind of more expensive iPad Pros, and it's still the same sentiment that's today. The whole idea is that it's cool hardware, but there's nothing to do on these crazy tablets, these crazy powerful tablets. But I think it's changing. Like, you just have to be open to the idea of what these things can do. I really think that new Final Cut workflow with the multiple cameras being run simultaneously, where you can control focus and zoom off of a single iPad with all these cameras feeding into it, that is crazy cool to me.
And again, I know that I keep saying it because he keeps saying it. There's no way that exact same setup doesn't come to Mac and iPhone. And when it comes to, and I'm just trying to think about like what he's doing, that he has a lot of peripherals. I always say that word jacked up, but it seems like there's a lot going on that's connected to the computer that isn't just the cameras. So then having to do all that stuff into an iPad, I'm sure it could work, but it just seems like Apple's going to create it. It's going to be fine. But for a professional like him, I feel like, yeah, if he needs to go travel, that'll be a good thing for him to do. In fact, I remember Marquez Brownlee said that he used to travel with his 27-inch iMac. He had like a special case for it. So when he was in his hotel room, he could edit there, at whatever event. And I mean, I don't remember all the videos, but I'm sure if he were to able now carry these MacBooks, which I believe he does, and I would advise people to buy MacBooks instead of, I don't say instead of, but I was going to say instead of any of their desktops. But yeah, these MacBooks are great. Now, yeah, the MacBook plus the iPhone being able to put different angles, I'm sure that would definitely be a very good, strong use case. So I'm going to let these last, 12 seconds play. He shows his stuff.
Okay, but that's my iPad Pro review. It's a weird one, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. I'll see you guys next.
And yeah, like I said, no way that feature doesn't come to Mac and iPhone. And in fact, I feel like that'd be a better implementation of it, with the exception of people who are out and about traveling. But even then, it's like you have this big tablet, and then you have these little screens, little tablets, iPhones. It's a lot of glass. You know, the big tablet, if you buy the keyboard case, then I'm like, well, you're using it and you're folding it, so you might be sitting at a desk. You might be walking around, I don't know. And I mean, I would bet money, like, I'm not, I don't know, but I would bet money that even though Apple's saying, oh, with, this M4 chip, we can now do all these things, I am quite confident that once that stuff comes to Mac, which it has to come to Mac. Like, there's no way. Which again, using OBS, I feel like he could, and he's using OBS. I feel like he could do the exact same thing already. So I might actually play around with that for a little bit and see. But what I was getting at is that once it comes to Mac, which again, I feel like it should, being able to do that on an M1 MacBook would then question somebody as to, well, why can't my M1 or M2 MacBook Air or Pro do this as well? So I really feel like saying that it's something that requires the M4 chip, and I don't know if they specifically said that, but seeing that it's only coming to it now, is it possible that the older devices will get it if you are able to install, that version of Final Cut on your older devices? Which version of iOS do you need? A bunch of other questions. So we'll see. He has other videos out. And my closing thoughts, I'm probably well over an hour into this, is the iPad's fine. Should you buy one? I don't think you should. I mean, not an iPad Pro, an iPad Air, which he didn't talk about. But yeah, an iPad Pro, no. The moment you are looking to spend $1,000 on a tablet, on an Apple tablet, I feel like you should get an Apple laptop. I think that's the way that I would summarize it. If you're creative, I'm not talking to you because you probably draw on it. And then you have your new Apple Pencil you can buy, which sucks that you can't use your second generation Apple Pencil. You can use the USB-C Apple Pencil. But all that to say, seems like a nice device, but I feel like the Mac is still going to be the better option for people who need the power, and just a cheaper iPad is the better option for people who want an iPad and don't require much power, even though the Air has an M2 chip in it, and the previous Air and the previous Pro have M1 chips in it. So